The evening air was warm, carrying the faint scent of flowers from the grand garden surrounding the mansion. The sun had just begun to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, while inside, the halls gleamed under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. The mansion was alive with activity, servants moving quietly through the polished corridors, carrying trays of sparkling drinks, arranging delicate bouquets, and making sure every detail of the evening was perfect. It was the kind of night where the wealthy hosts wanted to show off their elegance and status, inviting prominent guests from all around, all dressed in their finest gowns and tailored suits, laughing lightly and exchanging compliments that sometimes sounded rehearsed. Among the crowd of glittering guests, there was a young woman named Anita. She moved silently, her eyes alert to every small command and every delicate vase she needed to adjust. Her uniform was simple, a plain dress that marked her place in the household, contrasting sharply with the opulence around her. She had grown up in this environment, serving in wealthy homes, learning early that the world she lived in would rarely notice her beyond the tasks she performed. As she carried a tray of drinks down the long marble corridor, she overheard snippets of conversation. Guests whispered about the latest fashions, shared small gossip, and occasionally sneered at those they considered beneath them. Anita's heart tightened with each careless remark. Though she had learned long ago not to react, she had developed a quiet strength, the kind that came from years of knowing your place but dreaming of more. Despite the tension in the air, there was a certain beauty to the scene. The ballroom stretched before her, a vast space with tall windows reflecting the golden light. Chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, casting shimmering patterns on the polished floor. The walls were adorned with large paintings of landscapes and portraits, each one a reminder of generations of wealth and power. And the soft music playing from a string quartet added a delicate elegance to the night. Anita moved along the edges of the room, unnoticed by most, yet she observed everything, noticing the way some guests tilted their heads in judgment, how a few whispered about the servants, laughing softly at their expense. She had seen this countless times, and though it stung, she kept her head held high, moving with grace and precision, her every action almost invisible but necessary to the smooth flow of the evening. The contrast between the glittering guests and the quiet servants was striking. It was a world where status defined every interaction, and appearances mattered more than honesty or kindness. Guests smiled politely, shook hands, and complimented each other, but behind those smiles were tiny judgments, opinions formed in a heartbeat based on clothing, accent, or social position. Anita understood this world better than most. She had grown up serving in such environments, learning to read the subtle signs of approval or disapproval, the slight shift of a shoulder, the faint roll of the eyes. As she reached the center of the ballroom with her tray, she paused for a moment, letting her eyes drift over the gathering. The room was buzzing with polite conversation and soft laughter, yet under that surface, there was tension, unspoken hierarchies that dictated behavior. The wealthy hosts stood near the walls, greeting their friends, while the younger generation moved in clusters, trying to appear carefree and sophisticated. Anita felt a mixture of emotions, pride in her ability to navigate this world without being noticed too much, and a quiet longing for something more, something beyond cleaning, serving drinks, and obeying orders. She loved to watch the guests dance, their movements flowing effortlessly across the polished floor, imagining herself moving with the same freedom and confidence. It was a forbidden dream, one she rarely allowed herself to explore openly, yet it warmed her heart as she continued her work. In that moment, she was completely aware of her surroundings, the soft glow of the chandeliers, the sparkle of the crystal glasses, the delicate scent of perfume mingling with flowers, and the faint strains of music from the quartet. Every detail mattered, not just for the guests' enjoyment, but because in this world, appearances were everything. One wrong step, one spilled drink, and a servant could be ridiculed or blamed. Anita had learned to move carefully, almost like a shadow, present but unnoticed. Yet beneath her calm and careful exterior, there was something stronger, a quiet fire of determination that no one could see. She dreamed of a life where she could be more than a servant, where she could express herself freely, dance without fear, and be recognized for her talent and spirit. As she adjusted a vase on a side table, she allowed herself a brief smile, thinking about the secret dreams she carried. The night had just begun, and although she didn't know it yet, this evening would change everything. Anita had barely finished placing the last tray of sparkling glasses on a side table when a ripple of laughter drew her attention. It was subtle at first, just a few soft chuckles among the guests, but soon it grew louder, sharper, filled with a sting she recognized immediately. She turned slightly and saw him, Mr. Rohan, one of the wealthiest and most influential guests, leaning against the grand staircase. A glass of wine in his hand, his eyes scanning the room with that confident, superior look. Everyone in the immediate vicinity seemed to hang on his words, their polite smiles masking amusement, and Anita felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. He pointed a finger toward her, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Look at her, the mere servant, running around as if she belongs here. His voice was smooth but sharp, carrying the weight of mockery. The word, mere, cut deeper than she expected, echoing all the time she had been underestimated, dismissed, or ignored. A few guests chuckled lightly, some even smirking openly, and she felt their eyes on her like tiny needles, judging, measuring, labeling. Anita's cheeks burned, a mix of embarrassment and anger. She wanted to shrink into the floor, disappear into the polished marble, but she had learned long ago that hiding or reacting would only fuel their amusement, so she held her head high, keeping her hands steady, carrying the tray with deliberate calm. Each step felt heavier, her heart pounding in rhythm with the sharp laughter that still echoed in the hall. He didn't stop, of course, his words sharp and deliberate. Look at her, serving drinks and cleaning floors, dreaming she could ever be part of this world. He leaned a little closer, and the laughter around him grew, like a spotlight. The humiliation fell directly on her, and even though Anita tried to mask her feelings, she could feel it in every muscle of her body, the tension, the sting, the weight of everyone's gaze. But beneath the humiliation, something stirred inside her, something that refused to bow down to mockery. Anita's hands, though steady, clenched slightly. Her mind raced, not with thoughts of anger, but with determination, a quiet, burning resolve that this moment would not define her. She had learned that people like him thrived on the reaction, the small tremble of fear or shame that they could see, and tonight, she would not give him that satisfaction. Yet, the room continued to watch, some with curiosity, some with silent amusement. The music from the string quartet played on, soft and oblivious to the cruelty unfolding. Guests whispered to each other, "She is so timid, does she even belong here? And, what is she thinking, standing there like that?" Every word, every glance, seemed to push her further into the role they wanted her to play, a timid, invisible servant, nothing more. Anita's mind wandered briefly, recalling her childhood, the first time she had danced in secret, hidden in the attic of her old home, moving her body to the rhythm of her heart, feeling alive, free, and unafraid. That memory, that feeling, surged through her now, giving her strength, reminding her that no one could take away her passion, her talent, or her dignity. She wasn't just a servant, she was a person with dreams, with abilities, with a fire that could not be extinguished by insults or ridicule. As the laughter continued, she straightened her back, letting her shoulders fall naturally, her face calm, almost serene, belying the storm of emotions within. Guests noticed the contrast, the calm composure of the girl they mocked, and a few eyebrows raised in surprise. Some even paused mid-conversation, curious about the quiet defiance hidden behind her modest uniform. In that moment, the humiliation, though sharp, became a turning point. The sting of the words, the laughter, the judgment, they didn't weaken her, they ignited something deeper, a silent promise that one day, the room would witness her true self, her true talent, and they would be the ones silent, staring in awe. Tonight, though, she simply finished her task, moved to the next table with quiet precision, but every step was measured, every movement filled with the quiet defiance of someone who would not be broken. And as the music played on, she felt it, the moment of change approaching, something in the air that whispered to her heart that this night would not end with humiliation alone. The room buzzed with polite chatter, but Anita's mind was focused, centered on the promise of what was coming, waiting for the moment she could turn every mocking glance into admiration, waiting for the moment that would leave the room completely silent. After the laughter faded into the background, Anita retreated to a quiet corner of the ballroom, the polished marble cool under her feet. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the empty tray she had carried, and for the first time in the evening, she allowed herself to breathe. The humiliation of Mr. Rohan's words still lingered, sharp and stinging, echoing in her mind like a cruel refrain. "Mere servant," he had said. And though she had kept her face calm, inside, a storm of feelings raged. She leaned against the wall, her gaze drifting to the glittering crowd. The chandeliers sparkled above like frozen stars, and the soft music from the quartet floated in the air, but she barely noticed the elegance around her. Her mind was consumed by memories and questions that had always haunted her. Why did they see only her uniform, only the label of servant? Why couldn't they see the heart that beat fiercely, full of dreams, passions, and talent? Every insult seemed to weigh heavier than the last, and yet, buried beneath it all, a quiet determination began to take root. Anita remembered the nights of her childhood, sneaking into the attic when the household was asleep, pulling aside the dusty curtains, and dancing in the golden glow of the moonlight streaming through the window. No one watched her then, no one judged her. She moved freely, every step an expression of joy, of hope, of the dreams that had been tucked away for years. Dancing had been her escape, her secret, and the one thing that made her feel alive when the world told her she was invisible. Now, in the grand ballroom, that same memory ignited a spark, a defiance she could no longer ignore. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from a strange excitement, the kind that comes when you realize that something in you cannot be ignored. The shame of being mocked clashed with the fire of her talent, and slowly, the anger she had tried to suppress transformed into resolve. She would not allow the judgment of others to dictate her worth. But doubts crept in, as they always did, whispering questions that threatened to pull her back into the shadows. What if she failed? What if they laughed at her again? Could she risk stepping forward, knowing that a single misstep could humiliate her even more? These thoughts twisted inside her, a gnawing tension between fear and courage. Yet, even as the doubts circled her mind, there was a voice, quiet but persistent, reminding her of the joy she had felt dancing in secret, of the strength she carried quietly for years. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the steps, the rhythm, the music she had always loved. The memory of her own movements, fluid and graceful, gave her a sense of power, a reminder that the world could try to put her down, but it could never take away what was inside her. She opened her eyes and looked across the room at the audience, at the very people who had just mocked her, and felt a strange shift, a realization that the power was hers if she chose to take it. Anita's chest rose and fell with steady breaths, and she allowed herself a small smile. The humiliation had not broken her, it had sharpened her resolve. She understood now that this was more than a moment of pain, it was a moment of choice, a crossroads where she could decide whether to hide in the shadows or step into the light. Her body felt lighter, even though her heart still raced, and a subtle excitement began to replace the fear. The ballroom continued its soft hum, oblivious to the internal battle unfolding in the corner. Guests chatted, drank, and laughed, unaware that one of their own, whom they had dismissed so easily, was preparing for something that could leave them speechless. For Anita, it was no longer about the judgment of others, it was about herself, about the dreams she had kept alive in secret, about the fire that refused to die. And as she straightened her back and lifted her chin, she felt the first stirrings of courage ripple through her, the courage that would soon carry her to the center of the room, to a moment that would change everything. The soft music in the ballroom shifted, a subtle cue that a new part of the evening was beginning. Guests straightened, some exchanging glances, others murmuring quietly as if anticipating a performance. The host's voice rang out, smooth and commanding, "If anyone wishes to perform, the stage is open for tonight." The words echoed faintly against the tall walls, and for a moment, the room paused, a gentle hush falling over the chatter. Anita froze where she stood, her heart skipping a beat. The invitation seemed simple, almost casual, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 possibilities. Her mind raced, a flurry of thoughts clashing like waves against rocks. Could she really step forward? Could she dance in front of these people, the very ones who had just humiliated her, the very ones who had whispered and laughed at her being a mere servant? A part of her wanted to retreat, to fade into the shadows, to remain invisible, safe from the sting of ridicule. But another, stronger part of her, the part that had danced alone under moonlight, that had twirled in secret attics and empty rooms, rose within her, demanding attention. Anita glanced around the room, scanning the glittering faces, noticing the subtle movements of those who had mocked her. The very thought that they expected her to remain silent, unnoticed, fueled a fire in her chest. She felt the familiar rhythm of her heartbeat, a pulse she had always associated with dance, with freedom, with the moments when she had felt alive and untouchable. Could she take this moment, right here, right now, to show them, to show herself, that she was more than the label they had given her. Her hands trembled slightly, but it was no longer fear that shook them, it was anticipation, raw and electric. She took a slow, steadying breath, closing her eyes briefly, visualizing the steps she had imagined countless times in the quiet corners of her life. Every movement flowed through her mind, graceful and precise, the rhythm familiar, comforting, and powerful. This was no longer a simple dance in her imagination. It was becoming real, and for the first time, the thought of performing in front of others did not terrify her, it exhilarated her. Anita's gaze fell on the polished marble floor beneath her feet, the very surface where she had walked quietly, unnoticed, for so many years. Tonight, it could become the stage where she finally claimed her own voice. She imagined the way the music would guide her, the way her body would move naturally, instinctively, each step an expression of the defiance, strength, and beauty she had carried silently within. The idea of stepping forward was no longer a risk, it was an opportunity, a challenge. She felt ready to meet. The crowd continued its soft murmur around her, oblivious to the decision building in the young woman's mind. She could hear faint laughter from those who had mocked her, but it no longer stung. It was a distant echo now, a sound she could rise above. Her heart hammered with excitement as she took a single step toward the center of the ballroom, then another, each one deliberate, measured, yet filled with purpose. The fear lingered like a shadow at the edges of her consciousness, but it could not stop her. Anita felt a strange mix of nerves and liberation, her chest rising and falling with each breath. She told herself silently, "This is my moment. This is mine. I will not hide." The words steadied her, giving her the courage to continue moving, to take her place where all eyes would soon be upon her. She could already sense the room noticing the quiet determination in her posture, the confidence in the way she lifted her chin, a subtle defiance radiating from her very being. As she reached the center of the ballroom, she paused, just for a heartbeat, letting the anticipation settle around her like a cloak. The music continued softly, waiting, as if it knew that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Anita took one last deep breath, feeling the energy of the room, the weight of her past, and the power of her own talent. In that moment, she made the decision completely. A silent promise to herself, no matter what happened next, she would dance, and the world would see her, truly see her, for the first time. The soft murmur of the ballroom faded as Anita stepped fully into the center, the polished marble cool beneath her feet. All eyes were now on her, some curious, some skeptical, and a few with faint amusement lingering in their expressions. The music shifted slightly, the gentle strings of the quartet lifting in a rhythm that seemed to match the beating of her heart. Anita's breath was steady, yet inside every nerve hummed with tension and anticipation. She felt the weight of the room, the judgment, the whispers, the laughter from before, but it no longer held her back. She began with a single, careful step, her toes gliding lightly across the floor. Each movement was precise, deliberate, yet graceful. As the music swelled, her confidence grew, and her body began to move as naturally as it had in her secret attic dances. The motions flowed from her, fluid and instinctive, every step an expression of the strength she had carried silently for years. The eyes that had mocked her widened slightly, curiosity replacing amusement, and a few guests leaned forward, unable to look away. Anita's arms rose, tracing arcs in the air as if she were painting the space around her. The rhythm of her feet, the sway of her body, and the subtle turn of her head told a story far more powerful than words could capture. This was not just dance, it was a statement, a challenge, a revelation. The room felt suspended, the chatter and background sounds fading into nothing, leaving only the music and her movements. As she moved into the center of the stage, she felt a rush of energy, the very humiliation she had endured earlier, the mocking words, the sneers, the judgment, fueled her, transforming into grace and poise. Her feet tapped, twirled, and spun with precision, yet each motion carried emotion, vulnerability, and defiance all at once. The guests, who had once dismissed her as a mere servant, now watched in stunned silence, some even holding their breath as if afraid to break the spell. Anita's eyes flicked briefly across the room, and she caught the glance of Mr. Rohan. The same man who had mocked her earlier now stared, speechless, his glass frozen halfway to his lips. The power of her performance was undeniable. It wasn't arrogance. It was the quiet authority of someone who had discovered their own worth, the confidence in her movements, the elegance in her posture, and the depth of feeling in every gesture commanded respect, and slowly, or replaced ridicule in the faces around her. She moved with the music, letting it guide her, every step telling a story of pain transformed into power, fear turned into freedom. She imagined the nights she had spent dancing alone, practicing in secret, perfecting each motion, and now all those years of hidden talent had their moment. Her dress swirled softly as she spun, catching the light of the chandeliers, creating patterns on the floor that seemed almost magical. The audience was captivated, their polite expressions replaced by genuine admiration. Whispers of amazement passed through small groups of guests. "She's incredible," one murmured. "Look at her grace," another said. Their words, meant to compliment, were almost irrelevant compared to the silent respect that radiated from every gaze in the room. Anita had transformed the space with her talent, her courage, and her unyielding spirit. As the music built toward its crescendo, Anita's movements became bolder, faster, yet every step remained controlled. Each leap and spin was a testament to the hours she had spent perfecting her craft, the moments of doubt she had overcome, and the fire she carried within her. The ballroom, once filled with polite chatter and judgment, now seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next movement, waiting for her to finish, knowing instinctively that this performance was extraordinary. Finally, as the last note of the quartet faded, Anita came to a gentle halt, her chest rising and falling, her arms lowered gracefully. The room remained silent for a heartbeat, then slowly, the sound of applause began to grow, soft at first, then stronger, until it filled the entire space. Guests who had once sneered now clapped with admiration, some even standing in ovation, and in that moment, Anita realized the truth she had always known: talent, courage, and the strength to rise above humiliation could transform not just a performance, but the perception of everyone watching. The final notes of the music swelled in the ballroom, and Anita felt a rush of exhilaration coursing through her. Every movement she had practiced, every secret step she had taken in empty rooms, now merged into a perfect rhythm, flowing naturally, effortlessly, and yet with every ounce of emotion she possessed. She could feel the eyes of the entire room fixed on her, their attention no longer curious or skeptical, but fully captivated, every glance a silent acknowledgement of her skill. Her chest rose and fell with steady breaths, though her heart pounded like a drum. The room had been transformed in her presence, the very energy shifted as if the walls themselves leaned in to witness what she had created. No longer was she the timid servant, the girl dismissed and ridiculed. She was a force, radiant and undeniable, commanding respect not through wealth or status, but through sheer talent, courage, and the authenticity of her performance. Anita's feet moved with precision, her arms arcing through the air in fluid, graceful patterns. Each twirl, each leap, each subtle gesture told the story of every humiliation she had endured, every quiet dream she had nurtured in secret, and every moment of doubt she had overcome. The ballroom, once filled with whispers and judgment, now pulsed with silent awe, the only sound the soft hum of the lingering music and the beating hearts of those watching. She spun in the center, her dress fanning around her like rippling waves, catching the warm light of the chandeliers, creating patterns on the marble floor that seemed almost magical. The movement was more than dance, it was an assertion of her existence, a declaration that she could not be diminished or ignored. The very energy of the room seemed to bend to her performance, the whispers of doubt now replaced by gasps of admiration, murmurs of amazement, and eyes wide with awe. Mr. Rohan, who had sneered at her mere moments before, now stood frozen, unable to speak, his confident composure shattered. The pride and mockery in his eyes had vanished, replaced by disbelief and respect. He watched, perhaps for the first time truly seeing her, as Anita poured every ounce of her being into the dance, each step defying the limitations they had tried to place upon her. The guests around the room leaned forward, collectively holding their breath. Their faces reflected surprise, admiration, and even a touch of shame for having judged her so harshly. The young socialites, who had once whispered behind their fans, now whispered in reverence, "She is extraordinary." Some whispered that they had never seen such talent, others simply stared, overwhelmed by the presence and confidence that radiated from the young woman who had once been invisible. Anita felt the culmination of all her emotions, the fear, the humiliation, the years of dreaming, and the secret practice sessions, flowing through her, fueling her movements. She spun, leapt, and twirled with a power that stunned even herself. Her final pose was a perfect balance of strength and grace, a moment frozen in time, where her body, her spirit, and her talent converged in a single declaration: I am here, I am worthy, and I am unstoppable. The room was silent for a heartbeat, a long, breathless pause that hung in the air. Then, like a breaking wave, the applause erupted, spontaneous, thunderous, and unstoppable. Guests rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some even laughing in delight, overwhelmed by the sheer brilliance of what they had witnessed. The energy was electric, a celebration not only of her skill but of her courage, her resilience, and her refusal to remain invisible. Anita lowered her arms slowly, taking a graceful bow, feeling the warmth of recognition wash over her. The same people who had mocked and belittled her only moments ago now looked at her with respect and admiration. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the sheer power of her performance. The transformation was complete. She had turned humiliation into triumph, invisibility into presence, doubt into undeniable proof of her worth. In that moment, Anita knew the truth she had always carried in her heart. The world could try to define her, to diminish her, to ignore her, but nothing could stop her when she believed in herself. When she stepped back from the center of the ballroom, the applause still echoing, she realized that this night would remain in memory, not just hers, but everyone who had witnessed it. The servant who had been mocked had become a symbol of talent, courage, and the power of refusing to be underestimated.
As the last graceful movements of Anita's dance lingered in the air, a strange hush fell over the ballroom. The gentle hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and even the soft rustle of gowns seemed to disappear, replaced by a stillness so profound it felt almost sacred. Guests stared, their eyes wide, mouths slightly open, unable to reconcile the vision before them with the mere servant they had laughed at just moments ago. Every step, every turn, every expression had transformed her from an unnoticed presence into the center of attention. The change was subtle at first, a flicker in someone's eyes, a hesitant glance of recognition, then a ripple spread through the crowd, murmurs of astonishment replacing judgment. "Did you see that?" One whispered. "She's incredible," another murmured. Even those who had mocked her earlier found themselves frozen, their previous confidence shaken by the undeniable talent and grace displayed. Anita had not just performed, she had commanded the room, claiming a space that no one had expected her to occupy. Mr. Rohan, who had sneered at her only minutes before, now stood rigid, a rare look of shock crossing his face. The smug amusement that had colored his expression vanished, replaced by a strange mixture of awe and disbelief. He opened his mouth, perhaps to speak, to apologize, or to regain his composure, but no words came, and his glass remained untouched, the power dynamic in the room shifting in ways he could neither ignore nor control. Guests who had been polite and reserved now leaned forward, their attention completely captured. They watched her every movement, the fluidity of her arms, the poise of her posture, and the intensity in her eyes, the subtle emotion she had woven into her dance. Pain, defiance, hope, resonated deeply, touching hearts that had never expected to feel anything for a servant. Even the youngest of the guests, children of wealth who had been taught to look down on her, now whispered to each other in awe, "She's amazing," as if discovering a hidden world of beauty they had never noticed before. Anita's own heart raced, but this time it was not from fear or tension, it was from the thrill of recognition, the quiet joy of being seen for who she truly was. She felt the energy of the room shift around her, a wave of respect and admiration washing over the audience, and with each subtle nod, each widened eye, she felt her confidence grow, reinforcing the courage that had brought her here. The humiliation she had endured earlier had melted into something else entirely, a triumph that was not just personal, but visible to everyone. The host of the evening, who had initially welcomed her performance as a casual entertainment, now smiled broadly, clapping with genuine delight. "What a remarkable display of talent," he said. His words, though official, could not contain the surprise and admiration in the room. Others joined in, the applause spreading from group to group, growing in volume and intensity until it felt like the walls themselves were vibrating with the acknowledgement of her brilliance. Even the skeptics, those who had been ready to dismiss her with a laugh, found themselves caught in the tide of appreciation. Some clapped hesitantly at first, then more vigorously. Others exchanged amazed glances, whispering that they had underestimated her completely. The labels, the mockery, the social hierarchy that had seemed so unshakable just an hour ago, now felt fragile, irrelevant, unable to withstand the undeniable power of her performance. Anita lowered her arms, a soft, humble bow to the audience, but inside, she felt a surge of pride, a quiet triumph that went beyond applause. It was the knowledge that she had transformed their perception, that she had stepped beyond the boundaries they had imposed on her, and claimed her rightful place in that moment. The room had fallen silent once, but now it was filled with energy, admiration, and a newfound respect. And she realized something profound. One performance, one act of courage, could change everything. As the applause continued, Anita allowed herself a small smile, her eyes scanning the faces of those who had doubted her, and she understood the truth she had always carried in her heart: talent, courage, and the willingness to rise above humiliation had the power to transform not just a performance, but the very way the world saw her. And in that instant, the young servant who had entered the ballroom unnoticed became a figure of inspiration, leaving a mark that would not soon be forgotten.
As the echoes of applause slowly faded, Anita stepped back from the center of the ballroom, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. A sense of calm washed over her, mingling with the exhilaration that still hummed through her veins. The once intimidating crowd now looked at her with admiration, their expressions softened, some still in awe, others quietly reflecting on how easily they had misjudged her. She had faced humiliation, fear, and doubt, and yet she had emerged not only unbroken but elevated, a quiet power radiating from every movement. She glanced around the room, noticing faces she had never truly seen before, guests who had judged her based on appearance or social status. Their eyes now held respect, an acknowledgement of something deeper than wealth, appearance, or hierarchy. In their silence and applause, Anita understood a profound truth. True strength does not come from dominance, and worth cannot be measured by titles or positions. It comes from courage, persistence, and the willingness to show the world who you truly are, even when it seems impossible. Mr. Rohan, who had mocked her earlier, approached her cautiously, a rare humility in his posture. He did not speak immediately, instead observing her with a new understanding, his previous arrogance replaced by recognition that talent, spirit, and determination could not be diminished by wealth or status. When he finally nodded and offered a small, respectful smile, Anita felt no resentment, only a quiet satisfaction. The acknowledgement mattered, but more importantly, she knew her victory was hers alone, not dependent on their validation. As the evening continued, guests moved to converse about the performance, sharing impressions and repeating phrases of astonishment. Anita quietly returned to her duties, but something had changed. The tasks she performed, the serving of drinks, the arrangement of flowers, the quiet movements through the grand halls, felt different now. They were no longer reminders of limitation, but opportunities to move through the world with grace and confidence, to carry herself with the dignity that no insult or social hierarchy could take away. In her heart, she felt a sense of liberation, the kind that comes from finally stepping into your own power. The humiliation that had once weighed so heavily on her no longer had authority. It was a distant memory, replaced by pride, resilience, and the knowledge that she had turned an attempt to diminish her into a triumph that no one could ignore. Each glance from the guests, each whisper of admiration, reinforced what she had always known: talent, courage, and authenticity shine brighter than mockery or prejudice. Anita's story spread through the mansion that night, whispered from one guest to another, growing in significance as people shared how the quiet servant had transformed the room. The narrative of mockery turned to awe, and for many, it became a reminder that first impressions and social labels often blind us to the truth of a person's ability. Even in a world obsessed with status, there remained room for courage, for talent, and for the quiet defiance that changes everything. By the end of the evening, Anita paused by a window, gazing at the gardens outside, bathed in the soft glow of lanterns. She thought of her journey, the years of practice in secret, the moments of doubt, the harsh words and sneers, and the choice she had made tonight to step forward despite fear. The night had not just been a performance, it had been a declaration, a turning point, a proof that dignity, determination, and self-belief could overcome humiliation and disbelief. As she quietly left the ballroom, her steps light with newfound confidence, she carried with her a simple but powerful lesson. The world may try to define you, to limit you, or to humiliate you, but the strength to rise above it always lies within. Humiliation is temporary, talent and courage are lasting, and sometimes, all it takes is one brave step to transform not just how the world sees you, but how you see yourself. Anita smiled softly, knowing that tonight she had done more than dance. She had claimed her own story, and in doing so, inspired anyone watching to do the same.